say to you is we really hope that you will interact with us, with the whole team in the survey. What we do is a collaborative effort. A lot of external archaeologists can obviously use our resources, but they also give us information. They also update us on stuff. And we always want to be open to the profession because basically, do you know what I mean? You're one of our primary clients, as far as I'm concerned. Look, I'm happy to talk to you today about the survey. And first of all, I want to just put it a little bit in the context of the role of the National Monument Service. So you all know what the National Monument Service does. I'm not going to go through all of these, but what I would say about the survey is that our work basically is the foundation on which all other work evolves. If whether it's a ministerial rep or a referral to a planning archaeologist by a local authority, whether it's a notice from the Department of Agriculture or Forestry or Marine, whether it's a report from the public of damage or threat to a monument, the first port of call for most of our colleagues is actually to look up the Sites and Monument record, whether that be the HEV entry or to go to the actual file. We have a digitized version of our paper files. So either the officer looks at our HEV or they look at our records. So our records are really kind of foundational, seminal, and I think they're the basis on which all of our other work springs. Now, the reason I put up this slide, we transferred from the OPW, the National Monuments transferred from the OPW in 1997 to individual departments. And the reason I put up this slide really was to underscore that the administrative and political context does actually matter to our work. Obviously, we're working, National Monument Service, working within the civil service, and each department and the various departments we've been put into, they kind of have their own cultures and they have their own advantages and disadvantages. Currently, we're in the Department of Housing, Local Government and Heritage. It's been absolutely fantastic in terms of funding. We've been really lucky. We were really lucky. We've got a new minister now, Christopher Sullivan, but our previous minister, Malcolm Noonan, was an amazing minister, really enlightened. And with Michael McDonough and Niall O'Donoghue and the team in Heritage, basically he provided us with lots of funding and our resources have really replenished in the last couple of years under the stewardship of Michael and of Malcolm and now through to Christopher. But what I would say about being a part of such a large department is that large departments have very rigid structures. They're not as flexible as smaller departments. So when it comes to going off and doing something, developing a program, maybe possibly even in terms of things like ICT, we do not have the flexibility we would have had at one point. So there's always advantages and disadvantages. Obviously, for our planning colleagues, housing has a lot of integration with planning and the planning section. So that's a real positive. Our previous Department of Culture, Heritage and the Gaeltacht obviously had great links with the Gaeltacht. So, you know what I mean, every political context has its advantages and disadvantages. And I just wanted to outline that to you because you may not be aware, do you know what I mean, of what it's like, you know what I mean, to work in these big organisations where outside structures sometimes do dictate what you do. Now, in terms of the strategy of the department, obviously for ourselves, the heritage section, our statement of strategy is conserve, protect, manage and present our built natural and archaeological heritage and our biodiversity for its intrinsic value, which is very important, including to the environment, as well as a support to local communities, regional economic development and sustainable employment, to promote and provide information on the quality of our archaeological heritage as a support and stimulus for inward investment and cultural tourism. So within that umbrella of the Department of Housing, we've been able, with much more significant funding, from something like 700,000 in cultural heritage and the Gaeltacht up to something like 13 million euro now. So you can see the scale of difference different departments can have and can provide. So that's enabled obviously things like the Community Monuments Fund to develop, which in previous iterations, previous departments would not simply have been possible. Now, in terms of the history of the National Monuments Act, I'm outlining a kind of a short, very short outline, the history of, the Archaeological Survey. I'm outlining something very brief, but there was a supplement published by the team in the survey a couple of years ago, a supplement to Archaeology Ireland, and that should be available on the National Monuments website. So it just gives a nice history of the survey and of the different elements of the survey. But basically, the 1930s National Monument Act obviously was seminal importance to the emerging state. Basically, at that point, the focus of the Act was on monuments of national significance. And it was devised really to protect and to allow for the conservation and presentation of national monuments and for the protection of archaeological objects. So the National Monuments Advisory Council was one of the bodies which was set up under the Act, and that proposed setting out an archaeological survey of the country. At the time, it was estimated there was probably about 50,000 monuments in the country, and that was approved by the then Minister of Finance, Ernest Blythe. So it was to be a rapid paper survey looking at published sources. It was to include inspection and recording. And in fact, they were looking at detailed recording, so doing plans and sections and profiles and drawings of monuments as they went along, and excavation where required. And again, that was primarily to insist in the preservation of national monuments. It was started in 1933, and 7 years later, in 1940, about 2,000 records were made. Now, at the time in Northern Ireland, things were proceeding a little bit quicker, and there was a publication in 1940 of the preliminary survey of ancient monuments in Northern Ireland, and an establishment of the Archaeological Survey in Northern Ireland in 1950. So people, the public, the university professors were not very happy. They were saying, as you can see, Jean-Pierre Reardon, author of Antiquities of the Irish Countryside, said, we in the 26 counties must ask ourselves if we are content to lag disgracefully behind in this task. So there was a bit of publicity about getting kind of the survey established and getting a move on, making sure that it was moving more quickly. However, there was negotiations going on between the universities and the OPW and the National Monuments Advisory Council. There was concern about the format. The universities wanted research and excavation. The OPW wanted grading for the purposes of protection. So there was a lot of dispute and disagreement. And basically, it didn't happen. The survey wasn't established. A specific archaeological survey wasn't established completely independently until 1963. And then a director and 2 archaeological investigators were employed. And you can see their brief was to locate, examine, classify and record the nature and extent of all monuments and traces of monuments from prehistory to the present time. So you can see very expansive, like the original 1930s Act was, inclusive of all monuments. So they were a small group of archaeologists and were later joined by surveyors. And work was proceeding. By 1973, considerable work had been done in Louth, Monaghan, Meath, as well as Cavan and Westmeath, and that included doing plans and profiles and drawings. However, with the advent of development and the increase of development and increase of agricultural and construction impacts on the survival of monuments, it was felt that the process was just not quick enough. So in 1982, the Sites and Monument Record Office was set up independently of the Archaeological Survey of Ireland. And that was led by 2 archaeologists, by Mick Gibbons and Geraldine Stout, and they had teams of people working, compiling in a very quick series of years a rapid desk-based survey of all of the country. And in this, they were drawing up paper files as they proceeded, which are the basis to what we work with now. And basically, it was a very efficient, very effective process. Now, what they were doing was they were looking at published sources, they were looking at cartographic evidence, and they were also, of the teams that were there, and I think there was probably about 10 in total, 2 officers, Tom Condit and Catherine Daly. Their work was devoted to looking at that aerial imagery. So they were looking at the Air Corps aerial imagery through stereoscopes, as you can see of Catherine above. So they were actually doing an awful lot of work in terms of previously unidentified archaeology. Now, the compilation of the records that we currently preside over was done in a number of ways. there was the Sites and Monument Record Office. And as you can see, the Sites and Monument Record Office, these are the counties that they dealt with in blue. The Archaeological Survey in the OPW was looking at these counties here in green. Galway University under Paul Gosling was in charge of Galway, took over a contract for doing work in Galway. UCC in charge of Dennis Power and Sean Kirwan were looking at Cork and looking at Limerick, then subsequently Limerick and Kerry. And and Kerry was being done by the SMR office as well. So basically what we have is a compilation, as well as this, obviously there was John Bradley working on the Urban Archaeological Survey as well. So our records come from all of these combined sources, and not all standards were the same, and not all methodologies were the same. So for instance, we know that Cork looked at a huge gamut of sites, including all their post-medieval material, and not all of their material they have was actually included in the final published Sites and Monument record. So there's actually a separate post-medieval survey which has been completed by Cork, and which we're working on trying to make that available to the public at the moment as well. So the archive is kind of critical to what we do. So all the work we do constantly, we're constantly updating the archive as well. That's out in Swords, and that's Rachel there, who's our archivist. So 1994, seminal year, both for the publication of the 1994 National Monuments Act and for the publication of the Planning and Development Act of 1994, which prescribed that local authorities were obliged to refer developments to the OPW if the development was seen to be unduly close to a monument of archaeological significance. So that was a really, really important piece of 1994, two pieces of legislation. From 1995 to 1998, the Record of Monument and Places was published. Now, as you'll know, the Record of Monument and Places is available in paper copies, maybe in local authorities, or God knows where it is at this stage, but we do have copies of it up online. We have a facility whereby you can select the RMP on the HEV, and you can see there's a series of overlapping PDFs, and these open up into the individual ordnance survey sheets, and then you can access the RMP, which is a Record of Monument and Places, and that's the protected monuments under the 1994 National Monuments Act. Okay. Now, in terms of the team and where we work, this is a bit of a laugh. We had a meeting down in Limerick, in the Debert Hotel, and obviously there's a Margaret who owns the Debert Hotel, so Margaret and the team welcome you to visit us, the Debert Hotel. But so we thought this was a good opportunity to take a little photograph of us outside the hotel. So just to introduce my colleagues to you, now we have Matt Kelleher, who's based in Limerick. We've got Jane O'Shaughnessy, and Jane's based up in working in Ballina but lives in Sligo. And then we have Mary Tunney. Mary is based in the Ennis office and working from home. There's myself. There's Mick Moore, whom I'm sure you know. And Mick has recently retired in June. Mick was based in Dublin. Olive was based in Galway. And again, Olive Alcock has recently retired. We have Cayman O'Brien. Cayman's based in Neenah in Tipperary. We've Jean Farley. Jean is based in Kirshgarteen down in near Fethard in Tipperary as well. And we have Dennis, who actually was just there with us for his retirement lunch, but actually Dennis had moved on to monument protection. So since we have Dennis's retirement from work, and since Mick and Olive have gone, in the meantime, the last couple of years, we've also got TJ O'Mara. TJ's got a background in archaeology and in built heritage, as he worked in the built heritage service for a long number of years. So TJ is very au fait with post-medieval materials, so it's really, really advantage to us to have TJ. And as well as that, we got Garrod back, Garrod Conroy. Garrod's based in Galway, and we got Garrod back from Monument Protection. Leo was just attending Olive's retirement lunch, and Leo Moran is doing a survey for us at the moment. He's contracted out to do a survey in County Mayo. So look, the role of the what we actually do in the survey, we create records. We basically, each record, when we have a new monument or a new feature referred into us from the public or from archaeologists, we have to create a record for it, and the record must must have a unique numerical number. It must have geographical identifiers such as a townland name, locational information in terms of grid references, and a proposed classification. Then we do field work. We go and visit the monument if required. It's described in detail. Sketch plans are drawn, photographs are taken, and research is undertaken on published sources, on whatever information is available about the site type as well. Then we compile summary descriptions. So the results of the fieldwork and the research are compiled into kind of a short, short and maybe ever lengthening. Actually, we're doing longer summary descriptions, but summary description of the monument. Then we print out a copy of the work we've done we print it out onto paper, because remember, we have to constantly update our paper archive, because no matter what is happening, sorry, I have a quote coming into me, no matter what is happening in terms of digital, and obviously digital is really important to us, but our paper archive is also important. Systems can fail, computers aren't infallible, so we always have a hard copy, and those hard copies are continually being scanned. So we have digital versions of them as well. And then there's this dissemination, which is basically that the summary description is published on the Historic Environment Viewer and on opendata.ie. So from the opendata.ie National Monuments page, you can download all of our data from the HEV in a variety of formats. So the archive, as I said, is very active. There's our paper files always being updated. And as well as that, we're constantly doing reviews of the body of material that's in the archive, making sure that everything is right. Olive, before she retired, did a big job in County Galway, and Angeli is currently looking at the files for County Cork. So we constantly have an officer liaising with Rachel, doing cleanups of our paper files as well. So the sort of descriptions that we do are, they're basically empirical. We give topographical kind of situations. We talk about land use and vicinity, related monuments, and then we describe the monument and, most importantly, provide dimensional information. However, we do not give value judgments. It's not an appraisal of the condition of the monument. These are empirical, kind of descriptive accounts of monuments. Now, in terms of where we are, in terms of the status and the summary of what we're at, in terms of the record, we have 162,523 records currently. So that's absolutely enormous. And I don't think people really grasp the scale of what we're doing all the time, but it's very, very big. And you can see that at present, we have 76% of the descriptions are actually complete. We have 10% where, when you open the HEV and you get the archaeological survey, is currently in the process of updating this record. Just 10% of our 162,000 records have that. Obviously, all the time, our emphasis is to try and fill in those blanks and make sure that we have some information on all monuments. As well as that, we would like to have photographs on all monuments. Unfortunately, that's not the case, and at the moment, obviously, with the difficulties with our computers, on the HEV, we don't have any images, but we're hoping to rectify to get our existing images back up again and into the future to improve that a lot, because for so many monuments, particularly stone monuments, the picture tells 1,000 words basically. In terms of our record, then maybe 7% is unlocated. So they're references to monuments which we don't have a precise location, but we may have a location to a townland or to a barony or whatever, but maybe not a specific location. But they're very, very important to have those in the record as well. And then obviously 7% is redundant records. And on the left, I've outlined what redundant records are. And I'm not going to go through that in detail now. So I love this graph. Because it kind of looks as if it's like a Leaning Tower of Pisa. I'm not quite sure why that is, but it does show the scale of what we're doing. Now you can see down at the Can you see down at the bottom of the screen, there's the little blue on the bar chart. Can you see that? Basically, those are the national monuments in each county. So, you know, we've got approximately 1,000 national monuments in the country. So our national monuments are those little blue pieces, and the rest of the monuments are the green. So you can see our county totals, and you can see the counties with the most monuments are Cork, Kerry, and Galway, by a long shot, and then Clare following on, and so on. But you can see that the scale of what we're working with. So if we want to make any change to our record or records, the scale of what we're doing is always huge. So as I was saying, in terms of records that aren't complete, we have for many counties, you know, a huge percentage of the county reports, there is a description on the HEV for each monument. But then there are counties which don't have that. So leading those are Mayo, Clare, Galway and Kilkenny. So Jane is working very steadily and assiduously in Mayo. A lot of fieldwork has been done in Mayo, but the summary entries have to be done. And Jane is working through several hundreds, up to 400 and 500 a year, trying to get that task done. In Mayo as well, we have currently Leo Moran out serving, because in both Mayo and Clare, there are portions of the county which have never been field surveyed. So that's, you know, it's awful, really. So we're kind of trying to focus on getting those surveys complete. However, and I'll touch on it later, we're having difficulty in terms of getting people to take up archaeological survey contracts. So just to give a very quick gazetteer of the sort of monuments that are coming into us, that are being found. I'm just going to go through these very quickly just to give you a flavour of what's turning up. So this piece of rock art turned up in Achill, and basically it was in a field, there was land structuring works going on, and the machine uncovered it and was reported straight away to the National Monument Service and to the National Museum. And it's absolutely stunning. It's, you know, got 5 kind of motifs of concentric circles, but you can see that actually one of them is extraordinary, this extraordinary 3D effect with the central boss. And again, that just turned up. The material is turning up constantly, all the time. We have the Bernician study group in the Inishowen Peninsula found this hill fort up on top of a hill with very dominant views over Lough Foyle, and actually over the entrance, the kind of narrow entrance to Lough Foyle. So Jane went up and did a recce, but you can see the hill fort is roughly here. It's a double concentric. There's a double concentric enclosure, and Jane's drawing there showing it. So overall diameter kind of ovalish in shape. We're not sure if the slope would have actually made up the other side, or if there was an enclosing bank on that side, but about 130 metres, the maximum diameter, and the inner enclosure is about 70 to 80, again oval in shape. So that just turned up in the last couple of years, and Jane went up and did a lovely description of it. And we're getting material from our uplands. I suppose our uplands in ways are I think, our poor relation in Irish archaeology. We have some fantastic researchers like Dr. Billy O'Brien, or Professor Billy O'Brien, and Dr. Eugene Costello doing amazing work in the uplands and publishing it. But our uplands are so vast and so extensive that we know we've got a lot of work to do in the uplands. And this is just one of type of sites that one can come across. It's classified as a structure because there's no obvious entrance, there's no obvious hearth. You know what I mean? It's not clear that it's definitively a house or a hut, and it's on a very steep slope. One made of kind of rough boulders and one side a revetment. And basically this is the sort of structure that occurs so regularly up in our uplands. This is a really nice site. Basically, bee-bowls. They're little recesses, square recesses in a wall garden, and basically a beehive or a skep would have been put into them, and they would host the bees, and basically for pollination purposes for the garden. This is attached to Milford House. So there is the house, part of the house is 18th century, but there's an earlier part which is 17th century, and it's expected that this is probably a relation to the 17th century part of the house. What I would say about anybody, and I hope there's some students present, the monument is the original document, and it's really important to examine a monument. For me, research on monuments without fieldwork is of less value than other work, because really the monument is your original source. And no matter how many times other people have been there and described it, every time you go and visit a monument, you often find new elements and new items to interest you and to that should be described. So what I would say to any field worker is, please go and visit your monuments. Don't turn this into an academic paper exercise, because archaeology is not about paper. It's about upstanding real monuments, and we're so lucky in the country to have so many of them. This is obviously a very interesting gable with all sorts of phasing, from a double light window being replaced and reduced and blocked in, a small flat-headed window, and then a beautiful, really beautiful trefoil arched piscina with a decorated but damaged bowl. So, the piscina is probably 13th century. So the church must have been. So really interesting archaeology all around the country. These are a type of site which is being identified in our plans again, charcoal making sites. Here's a group of them. I think that on a shoulder in the Black Stairs Mountains in Carlow. And you can see Jean's field report, where she's kind of drawn very accurately this platform. In terms of how they appear, the distinguishing things about charcoal burning sites is they tend to have a very flat upper surface. And because of the kind of the production, I suppose, the production of the charcoal burning. And there was, at the end of the 16th century, with the development of the blast furnace, obviously a lot of our woodlands were cleared for the production of charcoal for the iron industry in Britain. So a really important site type, and important to start to be able to identify them and to map them fully. And obviously Aidan O'Sullivan and UCD have done a lot of really good work, and Connor, I think, in UCD on the excavation of some of these in Glendalough. So Sweat House, another really interesting site type. This little one in Tipperary, just beside a stream, and part of the stream actually was kind of partly dammed to make a plunge pool. So a really nice site type, often in these kind of forest environments, are where they're found, and on slopes. So, as well as the work that the Archaeological Survey does in terms of fieldwork and research and taking in new records, we also look at other people's work. So what I'm going to show you is just a flavour of peatland work that's been extracted from all of the work that was done on Boardnamona industrial bogs by the Archaeological Wetland Unit, by various companies, subsequently contracted by both the National Monument Service to do surveys and by Boardnamona to do excavation work. And all of this information in these publications and in the reports is added to our records. And that goes for any excavation or publication or geophysical work. All the time we're striving to include your records and the fruits of your work back into the Archaeological Survey record. So for the peatland material, amazing site types. I mean, it's always nice to talk about wetland archaeology. This is for Ellen and for me. So look, these are the classes of site types that we have in relation to peatland site types. From the total record, that's about, at the moment, 3,774. But of course, that's always increasing, notwithstanding the fact that extraction has ceased on Boardnamona bogs. There's some amazing sites like this Crannog in Ballintemple in Offaly. It's basically a palisaded enclosure with a figure of eight-shaped house dating to approximately the 5th, 6th century. And some of these sites are just absolutely extraordinary, a really, really important resource. And notwithstanding the Boardnamona have stopped extraction, they are doing a lot of rehabilitation at the moment on their bogs. And we have National Monument Service has contracted at the moment IAC, but it was AMS, to go out and now do advanced surveys on the bogs that are due to be rehabilitated, and to carry out monitoring works on those areas where it's required, where Bord na Móna are building very big cells with bunds, and it's quite invasive work. So advanced surveys and monitoring is being carried out, and archaeology, of course, is turning up and being incorporated back into our records. So as well as the core work that we do, we also contract out a lot of our work. So this is just a flavour of what we contracted out for 2 years, from 2017 to 19. So just to give you an idea of the work we contract out, now at the moment we don't have a lot of contracts running, but that can vary from year to year. So in 2017 to 19, we had a small piece of work done completing entries for Mayo Abbeys and Priories, and actually Angela did that piece of work, which was really great. We had Alice McQueen and Vera Rahali looking at rock art examples in Cork and Kerry that we had, and they did a survey of that material. We had Frank Coyne looking at I think Frank Coyne, maybe Ed O'Donovan, looking at updating Westmeath entries, so providing us with summary entries for County Westmeath. We had a team from Dublin, an architectural firm, looking at historic houses on Ainger Street, Thomas Street and James Street. We had Colleen doing some work on Kilkenny, writing summary entries for us for Kilkenny City. And we had the Discovery Programme doing this fabulous 3D survey of a souterrain that was found in Swords. We had Alison and Vera again looking at some upland Kerry sites for us. We had Potter Clancy at the time doing some work on Dublin entries. We had, I think it was Kathy and maybe Nora at the time, I'm not sure, doing peatland survey in Derrenboy and Cornafulla. And we had a geoprospection team of Heather Gimson and, gosh, I can't remember his name, sorry, her ex-husband in Sligo, doing an induced polarisation survey at Main Bog in Westmeath to see could we trace a wooden trackway that was actually in the high bog, and they identified that through the polarisation survey, and subsequently we got IAC to do a probe survey and they traced it as well. So all the time kind of innovating and looking at packets of work that can usefully be contracted out. But we have had a huge problem last year in terms of contracts. We put out a contract twice in County Clare. We were looking for a field survey and summaries contract, and first contract we got nobody applying for it for the tender, or the first tender, and the second time we went to 5 invited tenders, and again nobody put in a price to do the job. So that is of real concern to us, and maybe we can talk about that a little bit at the end of the talk, because I'd like to find out what the issues might be. We're really anxious. We can't cover all the work ourselves, so we are anxious for contracts. But obviously, when we can't get anybody to take up the contracts, it's really disappointing. And I know Mary Tunney, my colleague who's working on Clare, Mary, was really anxious to get more of Clare done, and she was just really disappointed when it didn't happen. So Cayman O'Brien, one of our colleagues, is doing amazing work on Sketchfab with 3D models. He's creating 3D models of all sorts of monuments, earthworks, tombs, clahons, abbeys, individual little crosses, all sorts of things. I'm not going to do it justice here, so I'm not going to go through them, but in any detail. But do go onto the website. What Cayman does is, as well as the scanning the monument, he does little information points, giving information about the monument and describing it in detail. So, it's just fabulous work, and they're all available on Sketchfab. You can log in as a user, create a username, register on Sketchfab, and just if you search under Archaeological Survey of Ireland, you'll find all the amazing work that Cayman has been doing. It's great. That's Newtown. That's a bow barrow up in Newtown in Dublin. Well, I think it's a bowl barrel, standing stone over there, and a little hut site here. So a really interesting collection of monuments with a nice wide ditch and a little bit of a vestige of a bank. Very nice little monument. So at the moment, we're preparing for the inventory, as Angela will be talking about later. And we're doing a lot of work focusing on, our inventory. We have to create our inventory, which will replace the Sites Monument Record. And we have to work towards helping our other colleagues in developing of the new register, which will replace all the protective mechanisms under the current Act. So we've been doing a big piece of work reviewing all our classes. Now we have about, I think it's 461 classes, at least, maybe more actually. Sorry, maybe more. I don't know. I don't have the up-to-date count, but we've got a lot of different classes of monuments, and at times, well, all the time actually, we're constantly reviewing a variety of those. But we've done quite a concentrated review in the last short while, and just to show you what I mean, what we do when we do review is an officer has to specifically look at a class. So in this case, Garrod looked at altars, and basically he looked at each individual entry in the country and kind of decided, did he feel that the entry, married with the scope note or not? So our scope notes are very important to us. Our scope notes give us a determination for what should be in the class. So in this case, Garrod looked at altars. As you can see, he said most 33 on the HEV, happy enough to accept all bar the following 5, and he referred these following 5 to, he was giving a proposed reclassification and asking his colleagues, do they agree?
Take your time.
Sorry, Ellen?
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
Just to say that it's 10:40, Margaret, that's all. You asked me to remind you, but this, keep going.
Thanks very much. So then, as well as, as looking at those individual examples of classes, we obviously have to come back, and this is, this gives you a view of what we do. We review our class. Sometimes we amend our class note. For some of these classes, we're looking to discuss with the National Inventory of Architectural Heritage. Perhaps they'd be better suited to having some of the classes, a small number of classes, exclusively in their records rather than in the register, in the inventory. So it's kind of like an ongoing process, but we've just almost completed a very, very big review of a lot of our classes. And that's our scope notes and how we amend them. And they're obviously published on the information section in the HEV. So that will, when we finish this task, we'll have to give that, and that will have to go, our new scope notes, revised scope notes will have to go up onto the web on the HEV. So there, in the information section, you just read down and you can actually access this list of scope notes. So another piece of work that we're doing at the moment is we're looking at our locations. As we move into the new register, it'll be very important to have the location not exactly right, but approximately right, as Sean describes it, the indicative area of the monument. We don't have to be absolutely spot on. Obviously it's better to be spot on, but we do have to be approximately right. And we don't want to hand on the register unit, poor work that isn't up to standard. So we're doing an analysis, all of us are doing an analysis of 200 entries in each county, and we're looking to see what the level of accuracy is in terms of is our red dot on the monument? Is it on the zone associated with the monument? And if it's on neither of those, well, then we're going to have to go out possibly with the field visit and correct it. So as you can see from these examples that Mary did in Clare, she said locations are correct for 83%, so locations were incorrect for 15. The discrepancy was between 5 and 35 metres, so not a huge amount. That would probably be captured within the constraint zone of the monument, except possibly if it was a very small monument like a standing stone or a boulder burial or something like that. So look, that's an exercise we're at the moment. We're doing that countrywide, but however, we do know there's another problem that won't be solved by our desk-based exercise. We know that for our upland areas, the original locations of the monuments were incorrect. If you can imagine, for some monuments, for some monuments in very undistinguishable landscapes, like landscapes that don't have any clear markers, in the days before GPSs, when these surveys were carried out in the 80s and the 90s, the dots were not, people marked what they thought they were. But in upland landscapes, sometimes that can be difficult. So in fact, we have an example here of a monument that was up to 360 metres. or out, at a wrong location. So that's like a scale that a simple zone wouldn't be right. So in this example, where the monument was actually a piece of rock art. We had contractors who'd gone out to do a detailed description of the monument. And they went to the location here where they thought the monument should be. There was nothing there, so they marked it as an unlocated. And they obviously looked in the vicinity, but they still didn't identify anything. A forestry application came into us, and a colleague, Edward Donovan, was doing the work for the forestry report, the assessment for the forestry report. And basically Ed went out onto site, couldn't find the monument, but actually the landowner was there, and the landowner showed him where it was. Said, Asher, that's further up the hill. And he found it at 360 metres from the original marked location. The location that was marked on the SMR, on the original SMR, wrong location. Original RMP, wrong location. So we know we have a problem with our upland material in some areas, and we are going to have to correct it, whether that's by contract or whether it's by ourselves. So what Cayman estimates is that he reckons that of the project that we got done by contractors, 26 out of the 300 weren't located, and that probably means that the original location was wrong, and that there is that monument somewhere. We're not quite sure how we're going to go about trying to identify where they are. So other examples from Kerry as well. This one sent in by Bruce Sutton. Very thankful to anybody who sends us in any corrections. We're very grateful. Don't feel any item is too minuscule for our attention. Do you know what I mean? We want to make sure we have good records, verifiable records. So again, this one was 133 metres wrong. Another example, at Clohan, 180 metres out. So we know we have a problem. And I don't think it's restricted to just Kerry. I would say it's probably areas that were surveyed in the 80s in upland and in bogland areas where the quality of surveying, and it's no indictment on the person who did the original survey. It just wasn't possible in those days to accurately locate material sometimes. And we know we have an exercise to do. So megaliths at the moment, we got this referral. I was at the ploughing championship, and a man came up to me. He showed me a photograph, and he said, "I think I might have a tomb." There's a tomb in land of my neighbour's land in County Mayo. It turned out to be this absolutely exquisite court tomb in Finon in County Mayo. So we went out, we surveyed it, we did a plan, and Angelique produced this beautiful, beautiful drawing. We're following the conventions of the megalithic survey. Now, when my colleagues, Eamon Cody and Paul Walsh, moved from the megalithic survey into the National Monument Service, they were put into duties in planning and licensing and managing the archaeological survey. So they didn't have time to complete a lot of the work. And actually, there's a huge extent of archaeological plans not completed for megaliths, and where plans have been done for megaliths, there's no description ready. So there is a body of work there that needs to be done. So this has kind of come to focus recently because we got a lot of referrals of newly identified megalithic tombs. The expertise wasn't really there in the survey to do this work, so we've been building that expertise up. Because the megalithic survey had always done this work, the expertise actually wasn't built up in the archaeological survey, as I said. So now we're doing that. We're out surveying. We're building up a core team of Angeli, Jane, Garrod, myself, to make sure that we can have the skill set and that we can pass the skill sets on to others. So we're completing a lot of work on megaliths, primarily in the west of the country. Mary has done, all the officers in the west of the country have done up charts for me. I haven't actually sat down to see what totals we have to look at, but when we're doing this work, we kind of look at all the examples, see what's recorded, see what's not. And then Mary did up this really useful gazetteer, which we used as a guide when we're out doing the field work. So, there's a bit of preparation. It's not just blindly going out into the field. There's a bit of preparation analysis needs to be done with this work as well. So in terms of our ICT, this was our previous database. It was an integrated database. So it was our database was integrated with the GIS, so we could move dots. We could see in real time where we were putting our dots. It also had a capacity to upload photographs into us. Unfortunately, 2 years ago in 2023, it collapsed. There was a security error and a problem arose and the database had to be shut down. We weren't allowed access to it again. So it's taken 2 years, but we have a follow-up, a subsequent database has now been developed with the help of Gareth John and Mark Hegan in the department and the Department of Housing. Now, unfortunately, it's not integrated. And it doesn't have the ability to take photographs at the moment. And this is what I'm saying about the structures and the strictures sometimes of working in large departments. There is kind of, I suppose, standards within the department that dictate what sort of systems one can use. And it's wonderful. We're hoping to launch this actually tomorrow, so you're getting a preview. Hopefully it looks as if it's going to work very efficiently. All our records were taken into it, but it doesn't have that integrated GIS, which we're going to have to develop, and it doesn't have the facility at the moment to take images. So we are going to have to develop those two as separate projects, two parts of our work as separate projects. In terms of the Historic Environment Viewer, this was the original one, the HEV1, that was designed by Esri for us, bespoke according to our own requirements. A decision was taken to bring all of our ICT in from Esri in-house, and this is the current version of the HEV that's up, and that's being designed and worked on in terms of our GIS staff. Currently, Gareth John has two contractors, Sean Patton and Idelson Mindo, who are working on it. And Idelson has just produced, along with ourselves, a new version of the HEV, which he's hoping to roll out later in the year. I really think it's really nice. What I really like about this is the fact that the information bar is on the left. It's not actually blocking the monument at all. This is, well, the record I selected was Coolure Crannog. So yeah, look, I think it's really nice. What I would say to you is, please, when we're launching these things, please give us feedback. You know, obviously at the moment, our HEV doesn't have any images. It's a real loss, but I can only encourage my colleagues to listen to what I want when I get feedback from the profession. So I know it takes time out of your day, but if there's something that's driving you mad about something that we have, if there's something that's not up to scratch, if there's something that you really, really need, or you really, really would like, please do tell us, tell myself, send it into National Monuments. I don't care what way you get it in, but just feedback is really important to us. So all of our information obviously goes to all departments. And yeah, look, I think, yeah, on that feedback note, I think that's where I'll leave it for the moment. And I'll go back to my future slide again, Ellen, if that's okay. So sorry for taking a bit longer than I should.
Not at all, Margaret. That was absolutely brilliant. We can see how much work you all do in there. I didn't realize there was so many different aspects to your work. And we're all going to benefit from it, and we all do benefit from it, which is really good, the profession as a whole. So thank you very much. We've just two questions in the chat. So one is from Alan Healy. When the HEV is updated, can the SMR zone match the zone of notification? Or is there a reason for it being different? Thanks.
Oh, the SMR, sorry, Alan, is that?
Can the SMR zone match the zone of notification? Or no, is there a reason for it being different?
The reason kind of is, if I understand correctly, what Alan's looking for is, can the SMR zone not match the RMP? Is that it?
Well, will I mute? I can mute Alan if I find him here on the. Yeah. There he is.
Yeah, sorry. It's just you know, say for the larger archaeological complexes where the zone of the SMR zone doesn't match. If it's depicted on the HEV, the larger archaeological complexes, it would match the SMR zone.
Well, what we have on the HEV is the SMR, but that is different from the RMP. Okay, that the RMP, do you know what I mean, are the statutory areas. Okay, our SMR should really have matched the statutory areas, but my predecessor kind of decided that they were going to change the the format, and they were going to give, in some cases, probably because the RMP basically said that the constraint area didn't describe the extent of the monument, it indicated where it was, right? When Paul came along to develop the digital version of the RMP, which is the HEV, not the RMP, sorry, the SMR, which is the HEV, he gave a lot of monuments automatic zones, and they were of a certain scale that was decided by senior management, okay? So they varied, they weren't all the same, and they weren't the same, they didn't match the RMP, which was the actual statutory zone, but they were called, and it was a misnomer, they should never have been called zones of notification. There is no such thing in the legislation as zones of notification. Do you know what I mean? There is simply the RMP at the moment in terms of protection and in terms of the legislation. The SMR has no legal basis whatsoever. And that relationship will kind of be married, as Angelique will describe now, will be married in the inventory and in the register. So the inventory will be just a collection of information, and the register will be the protective mechanism. So what we're going to recommend, I think, and the survey will be recommending for the register what should go into the register in terms of areas. We will have to look at this again. And for what I feel, I think we'd be better going back in lots of ways to the RMP, because the RMP is similar to the new Act in that the new Act will be an area indicative of where the monument is, which is very similar to that RMP constraint, not identifying the extent of the monument, but showing its approximate location. So in a way, we've been using the Act incorrectly, to be honest with you. And that's why I'll be very happy to move off our current kind of merged zones, which I don't like, and merge polygons, the way the zones merge into a kind of amorphous polygon. I don't love that. I'd be happier if we have a new system which is clearer, I think. Now, obviously, when it comes to the large, not automatic, the manual polygons for like field systems or complexes or whatever it is, they will have to be drawn. And we have a lot of them drawn, but we have more to do.
Okay.
So I don't know, Alan, if that answers your question.
Thanks. Yeah, no, that's brilliant.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret.
Thanks, Margaret. And then the next question maybe is, you may have answered it anyway. It's one thing I was wondering was whether archaeological sites are only protected if they're listed in the Record of Monument Places, 1995 to 1998, or whether some of the SMR features listed at a later date are also legally protected.
Yeah, no, the SMR, you're right. The SMR features which are subsequent to the RMP are not protected under the National Monuments Act, but they are protected under a swathe of other different legislations of different facilities, like planning authorities. Planning authorities have objectives within their development plans. Once they state that they want to protect monuments in their development plan, those monuments have a protection status, not the same as being in the National Monuments Judgment Protective Area, but they have protected status under their legislation. Similarly, Bord na Móna has an obligation to protect the environment, to protect the archaeological heritage. Similarly, Department of Agriculture is required under GAEC conditions, which is good agricultural, and environmental conditions for monuments, to make sure that monuments are taken care of. So there's lots of other authorities that protect monuments in their own way, but yes, you're right, and that's why we'll be very happy to move to the register. And the beauty of the new Act, and Angelique will talk more about this, is the prescribed monuments, which is an automatic protection on monuments of certain class. But Angelique will talk about that.
Great. Yeah, I think that's a good place to end. I think we'll take 10 minutes. Is that okay for a coffee, Anna Gillet? And we'll come back just before 11:10.